3 days after I saved Google $47 million, their CEO personally called to offer me something that would destroy my former business partner forever. My name is Kieran Valdez. I'm 34 years old, and I built Nexus Flow Analytics from a cramped garage in Portland, Oregon, into a cutting-edge data visualization company worth $8.2 million. What started as two college friends with a shared dream of revolutionizing how businesses understand their data became the most painful betrayal of my life, until it became the most satisfying revenge. I spent 6 years turning late-night coding sessions and ramen noodle dinners into a thriving consultancy with Fortune 500 clients. Companies like Tesla, Netflix, and major pharmaceutical corporations trusted us to transform their raw data into actionable insights that saved them millions. That client list represented everything: our reputation, our revenue, our future. When my business partner Dashiell Morvain deleted every single contact, contract, and communication thread at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning, he thought he'd destroyed me completely. I met Dashiell freshman year at Oregon State University. Computer science majors who bonded over our shared obsession with machine learning algorithms and our mutual frustration with how poorly most companies utilized their data. While other students were partying, we were in the lab building predictive models that could forecast customer behavior with frightening accuracy. He was brilliant, arguably more technically gifted than me, but he had this edge of entitlement that I initially mistook for confidence. After graduation, we pooled our savings, $23,000 between us, and rented a garage space in Southeast Portland. The early days were brutal. 18-hour coding marathons, living off energy drinks and takeout, cold calling potential clients who hung up the moment we mentioned data analytics. But we had something special. Our visualization software could take incomprehensible spreadsheets and turn them into interactive dashboards that told stories. CEOs could finally understand what their data was actually saying. Dashiell handled the technical architecture while I focused on client relationships and business development. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. I trusted him completely with system access, financial records, everything. That trust would nearly cost me everything I'd worked for, until Google's CEO taught me that sometimes the best revenge is simply being excellent. Our first major breakthrough came in year 3, when Cascade Pharmaceuticals hired us to analyze their drug trial data. Their existing analytics team had spent 8 months trying to identify why certain test groups showed inconsistent results. Dashiell's algorithms cracked it in 2 weeks, a data correlation pattern so subtle that traditional analysis had missed it completely. The insights we provided saved them from a failed $180 million drug launch. Word spread quickly in the pharmaceutical industry. Within 6 months, we had contracts with 3 major drug companies and a waiting list of potential clients. Revenue jumped from $340,000 to $2.1 million in a single year. We moved out of the garage into a sleek downtown Portland office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. Dashiell loved the lifestyle upgrade. Designer clothes replaced his old hoodies. He traded his beat-up Honda for a Tesla Model S and started talking about buying a house in the West Hills. I was more conservative, reinvesting most profits back into better hardware and hiring additional talent. We brought on 3 junior developers and a sales coordinator named Maya Chen, who proved exceptional at nurturing client relationships. The success felt surreal sometimes. 2 kids from working-class families. My dad was a mechanic, Dashiell's mom cleaned offices, now commanding 6-figure consulting fees from Fortune 500 companies. But with success came pressure. Clients expected miracles, competitors were copying our approaches, and the workload was crushing. Dashiell started complaining about being undervalued, suggesting that his technical contributions were more important than my business development efforts. I dismissed his grumbling as stress. We were partners, 50-50 owners, sharing equally in every success. I thought our friendship could weather any tension. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. Dashiell had always been competitive, even in college. He hated when professors praised my presentations, or when I received higher grades on joint projects. Success hadn't changed him. It had simply amplified who he'd always been. The pharmaceutical contracts led to even bigger opportunities. Technology companies started hiring us to optimize their user engagement algorithms. Financial firms wanted our predictive models for risk assessment. By year 5, we were working with 23 major clients across 6 industries, generating $4.8 million annually. The end came without warning on a Thursday morning in October. I arrived at the office to find our client management system completely wiped. Every contact, every contract, every communication thread with our 23 active clients, gone. 6 years of relationship building, deleted overnight. Our backup servers had been corrupted. Even our email archives had been systematically purged. Maya discovered it first. She came running into my office, laptop in hand, panic in her voice. "Kieran, something's wrong with the system. I can't access any client files." I initially assumed it was a technical glitch, maybe a server crash or network issue. But when our IT consultant, Raj Patel, examined the logs, the truth became clear. "This wasn't random," Raj explained, his face grim. "Someone with administrative access deliberately deleted everything at 2:47 a.m. They knew exactly what they were doing. They even corrupted the backup protocols to prevent recovery." Only 3 people had administrative access, myself, Dashiell, and Raj. I knew it wasn't Raj. He'd been with us for 2 years and had no motive. That left one possibility. I found Dashiell in his office, calmly coding as if nothing had happened. When I confronted him, his reaction told me everything. No shock, no outrage, no frantic questions about how to fix it. Just a slight smile and a shrug. "Looks like you have a problem, Kieran." "We have a problem," I corrected. "We're partners." "Not anymore," he said, spinning his chair to face me. "I'm starting my own company, Data Vision Solutions. Most of our clients are already interested in making the switch. Turns out they were working with me, not Nexus Flow." The calculated coldness in his voice was stunning. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a planned execution. While I'd been focused on growing our business, Dashiell had been planning its destruction. He'd spent months quietly undermining our partnership, positioning himself as the indispensable talent while painting me as merely the business guy who took credit for his technical genius. "You can't do this," I said. "We have contracts, legal obligations." "Good luck enforcing them without client contact information," he replied, already packing his personal items into a cardboard box. The full scope of Dashiell's betrayal became clear over the following week. This wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a sophisticated, long-term plan to steal our entire business. For months, he'd been systematically copying client data, downloading proprietary algorithms, and building relationships with key decision-makers at our biggest accounts. Maya and I worked frantically to reconstruct our client list from memory and scattered email fragments in our personal accounts. We managed to contact about half our clients, but the damage was devastating. Dashiell had already reached out to most of them with a compelling story. Nexus Flow was unstable. He was the real technical genius behind their success, and Data Vision Solutions could provide better service at lower prices. 3 of our biggest clients, companies representing $1.8 million in annual revenue, immediately terminated their contracts. Others demanded explanations for why their data had been compromised. The pharmaceutical companies, paranoid about data security, suspended all projects pending investigation. I discovered that Dashiell had been planning this for at least 8 months. He'd quietly registered Data Vision Solutions as a corporation, secured office space in Seattle, and even hired 2 of our junior developers with promises of equity and higher salaries. He'd used his access to our financial records to understand exactly which clients were most profitable and most likely to jump ship. The most painful part wasn't the business loss. It was realizing how completely I'd been deceived. Every late-night strategy session, every celebration of a new client win, every conversation about our shared future had been a lie. While I'd been viewing him as my closest friend and trusted partner, he'd been viewing me as an obstacle to his individual success. I'd introduced him to my family, invited him to my sister's wedding, considered him the brother I'd never had. We'd talked about building something lasting together, maybe going public someday, creating a legacy. All of it had been performance on his part, manipulation designed to keep me trusting and unsuspecting while he planned his takeover. Legal action seemed impossible. Our partnership agreement had loopholes that a good lawyer could exploit, and proving intentional sabotage would require expensive litigation with uncertain outcomes. Dashiell knew I didn't have the resources for a prolonged legal battle, not with our revenue stream destroyed and clients fleeing. He'd planned this perfectly, leaving me with a company name and empty offices while he walked away with everything that mattered. Looking back, the warning signs had been there for months, but I'd ignored them or rationalized them away. Dashiell's increasing criticism of my contributions to the company, his subtle undermining of my authority in client meetings, the way he'd started taking sole credit for technical breakthroughs that had been collaborative efforts. Last spring, during a presentation to Microsoft's data analytics team, Dashiell had introduced himself as the founder and chief architect of Nexus Flow's core technology. When I'd corrected him afterward, mentioning that we were co-founders, he'd laughed it off as a simple misspeak. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a trial balloon, testing whether he could rewrite our company's origin story. Maya had mentioned concerns about Dashiell's behavior months earlier. She'd noticed him working unusually late, accessing client files outside normal business hours, and asking pointed questions about our contract terms and client satisfaction levels. When she'd brought these observations to me, I'd defended him. "He's just being thorough," I'd said. "That's why our clients love working with us." I'd also ignored the growing tension in our partnership meetings. Dashiell had become increasingly argumentative about strategic decisions, often suggesting that my business side perspective wasn't technical enough to understand the real challenges we faced. He'd started scheduling client calls without including me, claiming it was more efficient to have direct technical discussions without business interference. The equity split had been another red flag. 6 months earlier, Dashiell had suggested restructuring our partnership to reflect what he called actual value creation. He wanted the technical team, meaning primarily himself, to receive a larger ownership percentage, arguing that algorithms were more valuable than client relationships. I'd refused, insisting that both sides of the business were equally important. That refusal had probably accelerated his timeline for leaving. If he couldn't get control of Nexus Flow through negotiation, he'd simply destroy it and start over with the pieces he wanted. The client list, the proprietary technology, the market reputation. He'd take everything except me. I spent sleepless nights replaying conversations, searching for clues I'd missed, wondering if I could have prevented this catastrophe. The painful truth was that I'd been naive about human nature. I'd assumed that shared success would strengthen our partnership, not realizing that for some people, shared success feels like diminished individual achievement. With our client base decimated and our reputation in question, I had 2 choices: give up or fight back. Giving up meant accepting that 6 years of work had been wasted, that Dashiell had successfully stolen everything we'd built together. Fighting back meant starting over with almost nothing, trying to rebuild relationships and prove that Nexus Flow could survive without its co-founder. I chose to fight, but I knew I needed help. First, I hired a digital forensics expert named Elena Rodriguez, a former cybersecurity specialist who'd started her own consulting firm. Elena's job was to document exactly what Dashiell had done, both for potential legal action and to reassure remaining clients that we understood the scope of the breach. Elena's findings were worse than I'd expected. Dashiell hadn't just deleted our client list. He'd been systematically copying our proprietary algorithms for months, downloading source code, client analysis templates, and even our pricing models. He'd essentially stolen our entire intellectual property arsenal to give DataVision Solutions an immediate competitive advantage. "This is corporate espionage," Elena explained, showing me logs of Dashiell's file access patterns. He was preparing for this transition long before he pulled the trigger. Look at these timestamps. He was downloading client files at 3 a.m., copying algorithm libraries on weekends. This was a carefully planned operation. Meanwhile, Maya and I focused on damage control with our remaining clients. We offered free security audits, implemented new data protection protocols, and provided detailed explanations of how we were preventing future breaches. Some clients appreciated our transparency and decided to stay. Others, particularly in the pharmaceutical sector, couldn't risk working with a company that had experienced such a significant security incident. The most frustrating part was watching Dashield's success. Data Vision Solutions launched with immediate credibility, signing 3 major clients in their first month. Industry publications wrote glowing profiles about the innovative startup, led by a visionary data scientist who'd previously helped build NexusFlow's technical foundation. No mention of theft, sabotage, or partnership betrayal. I realized that winning this fight wouldn't be about legal action or public accusations. It would be about proving that NexusFlow could deliver better results than Data Vision Solutions, even without our stolen intellectual property. I needed to innovate beyond what Dashiell had taken, create something so valuable that clients would choose us despite the drama. That's when I decided to pursue opportunities that would prove our true capabilities. 3 weeks after the deletion incident, Dashiell requested a meeting at a neutral location, an upscale coffee shop in downtown Portland called Stumptown Reserve. He claimed he wanted to discuss the transition professionally and ensure our remaining clients received proper service. I agreed, partly out of curiosity and partly hoping he might show some remorse for what he'd done. He arrived wearing an expensive suit I'd never seen before, carrying himself with a confidence that seemed almost theatrical. The awkwardness of sitting across from someone who'd been my closest friend for over a decade was overwhelming. This was the person I'd shared countless late nights with, celebrating breakthroughs and commiserating over failures. Now he felt like a stranger wearing Dashiell's face. "You look good," he said, as if we were old friends catching up instead of former partners dealing with corporate theft. "I heard you're rebuilding the client list. That's impressive dedication." "Rebuilding what you destroyed," I replied. "Let's not pretend this was some natural business evolution." Dashiell's expression didn't change. "Business is competitive, Kieran. You taught me that. You always said we needed to be aggressive about protecting our market position. I'm just applying that lesson." The casual reframing of his betrayal as business strategy was infuriating. He was attempting to normalize corporate sabotage as simple competition, as if deleting our client database was equivalent to offering better pricing or superior service. "I never taught you to steal from your partners," I said. "There's a difference between competition and destruction." "Is there?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "You built NexusFlow's business relationships while I built the technology that made those relationships valuable. When we split up, why shouldn't I take the part I created?" The revisionist history was stunning. Dashiell was genuinely rewriting our partnership as if he'd been the sole creator of our success, as if my 6 years of client development, strategic planning, and business growth had been insignificant contributions to our shared achievement. "You didn't just take your contributions," I pointed out. "You sabotaged mine. You could have left and competed fairly. Instead, you chose to destroy what we'd built together." Dashiell shrugged. "I chose to be efficient. Why spend years building a client base from scratch when I already knew which companies needed our services?" That moment crystallized everything about his character. He genuinely saw no moral distinction between earning success and stealing it. The meeting ended with no resolution, just a clearer understanding that this conflict would only end when one of us was completely defeated. 2 days after our coffee shop meeting, I received a cease and desist letter from Dashiell's attorney, Marcus Webb, a corporate lawyer whose Portland firm specialized in intellectual property disputes. The letter accused me of harassment, defamation, and interference with business relationships. According to Webb, I was supposedly contacting Data Vision Solutions clients with false allegations about stolen technology and corporate sabotage. The accusations were partially true and completely twisted. I had contacted former NexusFlow clients who'd moved to Data Vision Solutions, but not to make false allegations. I'd simply asked whether they'd been informed that the technology they were now using had been developed during my partnership with Dashiell. I wanted them to understand that they might be using intellectual property that was legally questionable. Webb's letter went further, threatening a defamation lawsuit if I continued spreading malicious rumors about Mr. Morvain's business practices. It also claimed that I was violating non-compete agreements by attempting to win back clients through deceptive means, and suggested that my desperate attempts to salvage a failed business were becoming legally problematic. The most manipulative part was Dashiell's counter-narrative. According to Webb's letter, I was a disgruntled former partner who couldn't accept that Mr. Morvain's superior technical skills had made him the more valuable contributor to Nexus Flow's success. The letter suggested that my accusations of theft and sabotage were motivated by jealousy and an inability to compete in the marketplace. Dashiell was attempting to flip our entire story. In his version, he was the talented innovator who'd outgrown a partnership with a less capable business partner. My accusations became sour grapes from someone who couldn't handle being outcompeted by a superior entrepreneur. The client data deletion became a legitimate business decision by a departing partner who had every right to protect his intellectual property. Reading Webb's letter, I realized that Dashiell hadn't just stolen our business, he was now trying to steal our narrative. He wanted to be remembered as the visionary founder of Data Vision Solutions, who'd escaped from an unsuccessful partnership, not as the thief who'd sabotaged his best friend's company. The legal threats were effective psychological warfare. Even though I believed my actions were justified, the prospect of expensive litigation was terrifying. Nexus Flow's revenue had dropped by 70% since the deletion incident. I couldn't afford a prolonged legal battle with a well-funded opponent who had stolen my client base to finance his defense. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt genuinely defeated. Dashiell had the clients, the technology, the legal resources, and now the moral high ground in public perception. By December, Nexus Flow was barely surviving. We'd retained only 7 of our original 23 clients, and even those relationships felt fragile. Maya had found a new job with a stable tech company. I couldn't blame her for leaving a sinking ship. Our office lease was coming up for renewal, and I couldn't justify the expense. I was seriously considering shutting down the company and finding employment elsewhere. The worst part wasn't the financial pressure, it was the isolation. Industry colleagues who'd once returned my calls were now avoiding me. Word had spread that I was involved in some kind of messy partnership dispute, and nobody wanted to get caught in the middle. Dashiell's version of events was gaining traction, the jealous partner who couldn't handle his more talented colleague's success. I spent most nights alone in the office, writing code and trying to innovate beyond what Dashiell had stolen. But every breakthrough felt hollow when I realized how few clients remained to benefit from it. The algorithms we developed together had been good, but they weren't revolutionary enough to overcome the massive disadvantage of starting over without relationships or reputation. Elena Rodriguez had completed her forensic analysis, documenting exactly how Dashiell had stolen our intellectual property. But her evidence, while thorough, wasn't enough to guarantee victory in court. Corporate espionage cases were difficult to prove, especially when the perpetrator had been a legitimate partner with authorized access to most of the stolen materials. "You have a solid case," Elena explained during our final meeting, "but Dashiell's lawyers will argue that he was simply taking his fair share of jointly developed intellectual property. The fact that he deleted your client list is definitely illegal, but proving damages is complicated when most of those clients chose to follow him voluntarily. I'd also discovered that the 3 junior developers who joined Data Vision Solutions had signed non-disclosure agreements that prevented them from discussing their transition. Dashiell had been careful to limit potential witnesses who might testify about his planning process or admitted intentions to destroy Nexus Flow. The final blow came when I learned that Data Vision Solutions had been selected as a finalist for Portland Business Journal's Startup of the Year award. The nomination profile described Dashiell as an innovative entrepreneur who recognized the need for more sophisticated data analytics solutions and praised his bold decision to launch an independent venture. No mention of Nexus Flow, partnership disputes, or corporate theft. I was watching my former best friend receive public recognition for stealing my life's work, while I struggled to keep the lights on in an increasingly empty office. For the first time since starting Nexus Flow, I genuinely considered giving up. Maybe Dashiell had been right. Maybe he was the more valuable partner and I'd been holding him back. That's when Google called. The call came on a Wednesday morning in early January. I was alone in the office, seriously considering whether to renew our lease or just pack up and end Nexus Flow entirely. The caller introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Enterprise Analytics at Google. She'd heard about our work with predictive modeling and wanted to discuss a potential consulting project. "We have a unique challenge," Dr. Chen explained. "We're losing approximately $47 million annually due to inefficient resource allocation in our cloud services division. Traditional analytics haven't been able to identify the root cause. We need someone who can see patterns that others miss." The project sounded fascinating, but I was immediately suspicious. Google had internal analytics teams with resources that dwarfed anything Nexus Flow could offer. Why would they outsource such a critical problem to a small Portland consultancy that was barely surviving? "Can I ask how you heard about us?" I said. "Actually, we initially considered data vision solutions," Dr. Chen replied. "Dashiell Morvain made a compelling presentation about your shared work on pharmaceutical data analysis. But when we did our due diligence, we discovered some concerning information about how Data Vision Solutions had acquired its intellectual property." My heart stopped. "What kind of information?" "Corporate espionage isn't uncommon in tech, but it's not something Google associates with. We prefer to work with companies that build their capabilities honestly." Mr. Morvain's presentation essentially admitted that he'd taken proprietary algorithms from a previous partnership without authorization. That raised red flags. I could barely believe what I was hearing. Dashiell's arrogance had finally caught up with him. In his eagerness to impress Google with Data Vision Solutions capabilities, he'd essentially confessed to stealing Nexus Flow's intellectual property. "We did some additional research," Dr. Chen continued, "and found that you were the original developer of several algorithms that Data Vision Solutions was claiming as their own innovations. That impressed us more than Mr. Morvain's presentation. We'd rather work with the actual innovator than someone who steals innovation." The Google project became my lifeline. Not just financially, though the $800,000 consulting fee would definitely solve our immediate problems, but strategically. Working with Google would give Nexus Flow credibility that no amount of marketing could buy. If we could solve their $47 million problem, every enterprise analytics company in the world would notice. I threw myself into the project with desperate energy. The problem was extraordinarily complex. Google's cloud services division was experiencing seemingly random performance degradations that were costing them millions in service credits and customer satisfaction. Their internal teams had analyzed server logs, network traffic, user patterns, everything they could think of, but couldn't identify the underlying cause. It took 3 weeks of intensive analysis, but I finally found it. 3 days after submitting our solution to Google, I received a call that changed everything. Not from Dr. Chen or the enterprise analytics team, but from Sundar Pichai himself, Google's CEO. "Mr. Valdez," he said, "I wanted to personally thank you for the work you've done on our cloud services optimization. Your analysis identified a problem that was costing us nearly $50 million annually. More importantly, your solution is already showing results. We're seeing 23% improvement in service reliability across our entire cloud infrastructure." I was speechless. The CEO of Google was calling to thank me personally for work that 3 months earlier I'd been convinced nobody would ever notice. The solution had involved identifying a subtle interaction between their auto-scaling algorithms and user authentication protocols that created cascade failures during specific peak usage periods. The pattern was so complex that it only became visible when analyzing 6 months of data simultaneously across multiple variables. "But I have another reason for calling," Pichai continued. "We've been discussing your situation with Data Vision Solutions internally. Corporate espionage is something we take very seriously, and we believe the tech industry has a responsibility to support ethical innovation. Would you be interested in becoming Google's exclusive partner for enterprise analytics consulting?" The partnership offer was extraordinary, a 3-year contract worth $12 million, with Nexus Flow becoming Google's recommended solution for complex data analytics problems across their enterprise client base. But the most satisfying part wasn't the money, it was what happened next. "We'll also be making a public announcement about this partnership," Pichai explained. We want our enterprise clients to understand that Google partners with companies that build their capabilities honestly, not through intellectual property theft. The announcement will include some background about how NexusFlow developed these innovations independently. The press release went out 2 days later. Google's partnership with NexusFlow became front-page news in every tech publication. The announcement specifically mentioned that Google had chosen to work with the original innovators behind breakthrough predictive analytics algorithms, rather than companies that had acquired similar capabilities through questionable means. Dashiell's phone started ringing immediately. Former NexusFlow clients who'd switched to data vision solutions began asking pointed questions about the legitimacy of the technology they'd been using. Industry colleagues who'd been ignoring my calls suddenly wanted to discuss potential collaborations. The Portland Business Journal quietly removed Data Vision Solutions from their Startup of the Year finalist list. Within a week, Dashiell had lost 4 major clients. Within a month, his 3 employees had quit, including the 2 developers he'd poached from NexusFlow. By March, Data Vision Solutions had quietly shut down, and Dashiell had moved to Seattle to work for someone else's company. The most satisfying moment came when Marcus Webb, Dashiell's attorney, called to discuss resolving outstanding disputes amicably. The cease and desist letter was quietly withdrawn, and all threats of legal action disappeared. Today, NexusFlow Analytics employs 47 people across offices in Portland, Seattle, and Austin. Our annual revenue has grown to $18 million, and we're currently working with 12 Fortune 500 companies on analytics projects that save them hundreds of millions of dollars annually. The Google partnership opened doors that would have taken decades to open through traditional business development. But the real lesson isn't about revenge or vindication. It's about the long-term value of building something honest in a world full of shortcuts and theft. Dashiell thought he could steal 6 years of work and innovation in a single night of corporate sabotage. What he didn't understand is that true innovation isn't just about algorithms or client lists. It's about the mindset that creates breakthrough solutions to complex problems. When Google needed someone to solve their $47 million problem, they didn't want the person who could copy existing solutions. They wanted the person who could see patterns that nobody else had noticed. That's not something you can steal from a database or reproduce through corporate espionage. That's something you build through years of honest work, creative thinking, and genuine expertise. The tech industry is full of people like Dashiell, brilliant individuals who believe that success is about acquiring other people's achievements rather than creating their own. They can copy code, steal client lists, and replicate business models, but they can't replicate the innovative thinking that created those assets in the first place. I learned that betrayal, while painful, can also be revealing. It forces you to discover what you're truly capable of when everything else is stripped away. When Dashiell deleted our client list, he thought he was destroying NexusFlow. What he actually did was force me to prove that our company's value came from innovation, not just relationships. The partnership with Google taught me that integrity isn't just morally superior, it's strategically superior. Companies that build their capabilities honestly create sustainable competitive advantages that can't be stolen or replicated. People who take shortcuts might achieve quick wins, but they'll never build anything lasting. Sometimes the best revenge really is just being excellent at what you do. While Dashiell was focused on stealing what we'd already built, I was focused on building something even better. That's the difference between a thief and an innovator, and it's why NexusFlow survived while Data Vision Solutions disappeared into irrelevance. Building something honest in a dishonest world requires constant vigilance.